There was a man in a grey suit following me through the store, 2 steps back, pretending to be interested in the cases. They had decided, in the 90 seconds since I walked in, that the old man in the work jacket had come to steal something. I had come to spend more money in that one room than the place would take in all month. And I stood there with a security guard breathing on my shoulder, and I thought, the way I always do in rooms like that, about my father, who fixed their watches for 40 years from a back room and was never once allowed to stand where I was standing. I will get to my father. He is the whole reason this happened the way it did, and the whole reason I let it. Before that, the favor I always ask. Somewhere near you there is a person doing careful, beautiful work in a back room, and the front of the building treats that person like a piece of the furniture, a repair bench, a kitchen, a loading dock, a boiler room. Picture that person while I talk. You are going to meet one, and she is the best thing in this story. Let me tell you what they saw when I came through the door. Because what they saw is the entire engine of the thing. It was a Tuesday in the spring on Madison Avenue, in a watch and jewelry house called Sterling Vandermeer, the kind of place with a doorman and a hush and a carpet that swallows your footsteps, where the cheapest thing in the cases costs more than a good used car. I came in wearing a canvas work jacket, a flannel shirt, and boots, because that is what I wear, and because I had driven down from the country that morning and had not thought to dress for an inquisition. I am 60 in the face if I am a day, grey, unshaven, with hands that have done work. I look like a man who had wandered in from a job site to get out of the rain, and in a store like Sterling Vandermeer, that is the same thing as looking like a threat. Here is what they did not see. My name is Gerald Pace. Most people call me Jerry. I built a company that made a part that goes inside a thing you have used today without ever thinking about it. And I sold that company some years ago for an amount of money I am not going to say out loud because it embarrasses me. And the practical result is that I am, quietly, one of the most serious private watch collectors in the country. I had an 11 o'clock appointment that morning with the private client director of Sterling Vandermeer, a woman named Cornelia Vandermeer, to buy a single watch. It lives in the back, in the vault, and it is the most expensive piece in the building, and I had come to buy it for a reason I will explain. And the reason is my father. But I was early. I am always early. And I had made a decision in the car, the kind of decision I make about every store I am about to give a great deal of money to, which was to walk in as nobody first, to not announce the appointment, to browse for 20 minutes as a plain old man in a work jacket, and find out who Sterling Vandermeer is when they think there is nothing in it for them. I do this because of my father, and because a store that treats the man in the work jacket like a criminal will, sooner or later, treat everyone that way. And I prefer to know that about a place before I trust it with the things I love. And I had a particular reason to trust this one with a particular thing. Sterling Vandermeer had, in its vault, the watch I had spent 30 years trying to find. I will not give you the maker's name, because the name is not the point, and the people who would know it do not need me to say it. It is enough to tell you that it is the single most complicated wristwatch that House ever built, that only a handful exist, that one of them had surfaced quietly in their vault that spring, and that I had wired a deposit a week earlier and made the private appointment to see it. And, if it was what they said it was, to take it home. A man does not buy a watch like that to know the time. He stopped needing the time a long while back. He buys it the way you buy back a piece of something you lost. I will tell you what I had lost. But the store had to show me who it was first. I found out in under 2 minutes. Nobody greeted me. That is the first tell, and it is a quiet one. In a good house, someone says good morning to whoever walks in, because you cannot tell from a coat who is about to change your year. At Sterling Vandermeer, 3 associates in dark suits glanced up, performed the math on my jacket, and went back to their phones. and the only person who moved toward me was the security guard, who drifted off the wall and began to keep a polite, insulting distance at my back. I did try, once, to be a customer. I stopped at the near counter and asked the associate there, a young man who would not quite meet my eye, whether the house serviced older watches, because I had one that mattered to me that had stopped, and I wanted to know if there was someone good who could look at it. He told me, without checking anything, that they did not really do outside work, that their watchmaker was for clients' pieces only, and that I might try a shop downtown. He said the word watchmaker, the way you would refer to a machine in the basement. There was a watchmaker, then, somewhere in the back of that store, the way there had been one in the back of every store like it my whole life. I did not yet know she was about to be the only person in the building who would behave like a human being. I put my father's watch back in my pocket and drifted toward the high cases. I drifted toward the high cases anyway, the ones near the rear with the serious pieces, because those were the ones I actually wanted to look at. And that is when the manager noticed me. His name, I would learn, was Tristan Whitcomb, and he was about 38, and he wore his suit the way some men wear a uniform they were not issued, with a kind of vigilance about it. I want to tell you the thing I noticed about Tristan, because it explains him, and because I did not hate him by the end, though I came close in the middle. Tristan Whitcomb did not own a single thing in that store. He stood among $100 million of other people's beautiful objects in a borrowed-feeling suit on a commission. And the watch on his own wrist was the least expensive model Sterling Vandermeer sold. The entry piece, the one they keep by the door for people who want to say they own one. Tristan was a man who guarded the door of a world he would never live in. And the thing that could end him, the thing he could not bear, was the suggestion that the velvet rope he policed did not respect him either. But he was closer to the man in the work jacket than to the watches behind the glass. So he hunted, with real energy, for anyone who might be from the outside, and he stepped on them. Because stepping on the outside was the only way he had ever found to feel like he was on the inside. He came over with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Can I help you find your way somewhere, sir?" Find your way somewhere, not find something. Find your way somewhere, as in out. "Just looking, thanks," I said. "These the in-house pieces, here?" "Those are by appointment," he said, smoothly, stepping a half pace between me and the case, the way you'd herd a stray off a lawn. "For our private clients. If you're interested in the brand, there's an entry collection near the front. Lovely pieces, much more accessible." He let the word accessible sit there, doing its work. "Marcus will show you out. Show you over." I tried him once more, because I am stubborn, and because I wanted to give the house every chance to be better than its manager. I pointed through the glass at a particular piece in the high case, a perpetual calendar I happened to admire, and I asked him, plainly, what they were asking for it. Tristan's mouth did a small thing at the corner. "That one," he said, "is $240,000. He said the number slowly, the way you say a number to a child or to a man you are certain cannot hold it. "I'd be happy to have someone print you a brochure, something nice to look at home." Then he glanced at my hands, at the work in them, the old nicks and the stain that does not wash all the way out, and he allowed himself a smile. "You look like a man who's handy. Maybe a sturdy field watch is more the speed, something you won't fret about scratching up on the job." It was, I will give him this, an artful thing. 2 insults folded inside a kindness, and Daria Fenn, at the counter, laughed softly through her nose. I let it wash over me. The joke of it, the part I kept to myself, was that the watch I had driven down to buy that morning, the one waiting in the vault in the back, cost more than every piece in the case Tristan was so carefully keeping me away from, put together. He was guarding a door against the one man in the building who had come to walk all the way through it. He could not see that, because he had already decided what a work jacket was worth. And a man who has decided what you are worth will argue with the evidence of his own eyes before he will change the number. The guard, Marcus, had the grace to look uncomfortable, which I noted and filed. That was the first tier, and a younger version of me would have either left or lit the place on fire. And I did neither, because I had become curious. The way you become curious watching a man dig, about exactly how deep Tristan Whitcomb was willing to go. He went all the way to China. It got worse because of a customer. There is always a customer. Her name was Daria Fenn, and she was somewhere in her 40s, dressed in the loud, careful way of a person performing a wealth that has to be performed because it is not quite real. And she had been at the counter, doing something with a watch and a slip of paper that I clocked out of the corner of my eye and will come back to. Daria looked at me the way a certain kind of person looks at the help when the help has gotten too close. And she said, to Tristan, not quite under her breath, "I'd keep an eye on that one. He's been hovering. You read about this. You read about this." As though I were a weather event. And Tristan, who had been looking for exactly this permission, lit up. He came back to me with the guard at his side now, openly. No more pretense of helping. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to keep your hands where we can see them. And I think it's best if you conclude your visit." He had raised his voice just enough for the floor. 2 other customers had turned to watch. "We've had some incidents, I'm sure you understand." "I haven't touched anything," I said, which was true, and which the cameras would later say in a voice much louder than mine. "Be that as it may." He loved that phrase. I could hear him love it. "I'm going to need you to show me what's in your jacket pockets before you go. We can do it here, or we can do it with the police, who I'd be happy to call, your choice." And there it was, the floor of the thing, the place the whole morning had been digging toward. "Show me your pockets." The old man in the work jacket, made to turn out his pockets in front of a watching room to prove he had not stolen from a store that had not let him near anything to steal. What was in my jacket pocket was my father's watch. I have to stop and tell you about my father now, because without him, the next 60 seconds are just a rich man getting his feelings hurt. And they were more than that. My father's name was Emil Pace. For 40 years he repaired watches in the back room of a fine jewelry store. Not so different from Sterling Vandermeer, in another city, a long time ago. He was the finest hands I have ever seen or ever will. Men brought him watches that 3 other shops had given up on, complications worth more than our house, and my father would put on his loupe and disappear into the back room for 3 days and bring the thing back to life. And the rich man would collect it from a salesman in a nice suit out front, and my father would never be in the room. That was the rule. The repairman did not come onto the floor. The repairman used the door by the loading dock. I brought him his lunch on Saturdays when I was a boy, and I learned the geography of that store, which was that there was a front where the watches and the customers and the men in suits lived, and there was a back where my father lived, and the two did not mix. And my father, who could resurrect a watch that a Swiss factory had declared dead, was a backroom man until the day he retired. And he accepted it, because that was the deal his generation had been handed. And it was the one thing about him I could never forgive the world for. He owned exactly 1 watch in his life, a cheap one. A plain steel thing he bought himself the year I was born, nothing. The kind of watch a store like Sterling Vandermeer would not put in its window if you paid them. But it was the most perfectly running watch I have ever held, because it belonged to the one man alive who could keep it that way, and he wore it every day for 50 years. I will give you one Saturday, because it is the one I think of. I was maybe 10, and I had brought his lunch to the back, and a man came into the store while I was there, wealthy, agitated, with a watch that had stopped on the morning of something that mattered, a wedding or a funeral, I never knew which. 3 other shops had told him it could not be made right in time. The salesman out front took the watch and carried it to the back to my father, without one word to the customer about whose hands were actually going to save his day. And my father turned it under the loop for a moment and said, quietly, to me, not to anybody out front, "The man thinks his watch is broken. His watch is only tired." He brought it back to life in 2 hours. The salesman walked it out to the floor and accepted the man's gratitude and the man's money. And, I remember, a good cigar. And my father ate his sandwich in the back. I asked him later if it bothered him, the salesman getting the cigar. He thought about it, and he said, "I got the watch." He meant the 2 hours alone with the movement, which to him was the prize. The part the front of the store never even knew was the part worth wanting. He had made his peace with the loading dock door. I never could, and that difference between us is most of who I turned out to be. When he died, his watch stopped, because the only hands that could keep it alive were gone. I have never had it serviced. I cannot bring myself to let another watchmaker open it, because the inside of that watch is the last room my father's hands were ever in. I carry it. It does not run. I carry it anyway. And it was in my jacket pocket on Madison Avenue when a man named Tristan Whitcomb demanded I turn out my pockets to prove I was not a thief. So I did. I reached into my pocket, slowly, with the guard tensing, and I took out my father's dead watch, and I set it on the glass counter between us, by itself, in the light. The only thing in my pockets, a working man's watch, plain steel, 50 years old, stopped at the minute my father stopped. I did it without heat, because heat was what Tristan wanted, and I had decided some time ago that he was not going to get it. But I will not pretend my hand was perfectly steady setting it down, because what I was actually doing, in front of that whole watching floor, was laying my father out on a counter to be searched, the way the world had laid his whole life out on the wrong side of a door, and inviting a man in a borrowed suit to satisfy himself that a dead man's watch was not stolen goods. "That's everything I have on me," I said. "You're welcome to look." I will tell you that the room went quiet in a way Tristan did not understand, and I did. Because watches are not nothing in a place like that. And a few of the people standing around understood, the way you understand a thing in your gut before your head catches up, that the plain old watch I had just set down with that much care was not the watch of a man who steals. And one person understood completely, and she had just come out of the back. Her name was Iris Lund. She was 44 years old, and she was the bench watchmaker at Sterling Vandermeer, which meant she was Emil Pace, 30 years later, the hands in the back room, the one who actually understood the objects everyone out front was selling. She had come out to return a serviced piece to a client, and she had stopped at the edge of the floor when she heard the manager's raised voice, and she was looking at the plain steel watch on the glass with an expression I knew from the inside, because it was the expression my father wore when he picked up something honest. "Tristan," she said it quietly, "leave the gentleman alone. He hasn't done anything." And then she looked at the watch on the counter, and she could not help herself, the way real watchmakers cannot help themselves, and she said, half to the room, "That's a beautiful old caliber. Somebody loved that watch." "Iris, this doesn't concern you," Tristan snapped. "Get back to the bench. The bench. That is what we pay you for, not opinions on the floor." He was performing again, for Daria, for the customers, reasserting the geography, the front and the back. And he had just done it to Iris, the one decent craftsman in the building, in front of everyone. The exact thing the world did to my father for 40 years. The closest I came to blowing the whole thing was not when they made me empty my pockets. It was when Tristan sent Iris back to the bench like she was nothing, in front of the room. The exact thing the world did to my father for 40 years. I was a half second from ending the charade with my name and Cornelia Vandermeer's name, and the size of the appointment in the back, to take Tristan apart and put Iris back on her feet. The words were loaded and ready. What stopped me was my father's watch, sitting there on the glass. Because I understood, looking at it, that if I rescued Iris by announcing what I was worth, I would be teaching that room the exact wrong lesson, which is that the backroom man matters only when it turns out he has money in his pocket. That is not the lesson. My father mattered in the back room, where nobody important was watching, where there was nothing in it for anybody to treat him well. Iris had defended a stranger in a work jacket 30 seconds ago, with nothing in it for her but a manager's contempt, and she had passed. The way my father passed every single day of his life. To turn her decency into a transaction by waving my checkbook would have been to insult both of them. So I closed my hand around my father's dead watch, and I left it on the counter, and I waited. Because the right ending was already walking up the stairs from the private rooms, and her name was Cornelia. Cornelia Vandermeer was about 55, the granddaughter of the man whose name was on the door, and she ran the private client side, which means she handles the people who buy the watches that never go in the window. She came up from the vault rooms to find her 11 o'clock, and what she found was her manager and a security guard standing over an old man in a work jacket who had been made to empty his pockets onto the glass, with a plain steel watch sitting in the light between them. She stopped. She looked at me, and her hand went to her chest. "Mr. Pace," she said. You could feel the floor of the room drop. Tristan's face did the thing a face does when it has not yet understood but has begun to be afraid. I watched the understanding move through the room in the order it always moves. Daria Fenn understood first, because the quick ones always do. And she took a small step back from the counter and began, very casually, to gather her things. The three associates who had not bothered to greet me understood next, and you could see each of them privately rewind the last 20 minutes and find the exact second they had decided I was no one. Tristan understood last of all, because Tristan had the most to lose by understanding. And the mind is kind enough to hold off the thing that will hurt us worst for as long as it possibly can. "Cornelia," I said. "Good morning. I'm early. I was just looking around." "Mr. Pace, what is happening here?" She turned on Tristan, and her voice did not rise, which made it worse. "This is Gerald Pace. Mr. Pace has an appointment with me, this morning, to look at the Vandermeer Grand Complication. The piece in the vault, the most important sale this house will make this year." She let that land on Tristan, one word at a time. "Why is there a guard standing over him? Why is his watch on the counter?" Tristan opened his mouth. There was nothing in it. There is nothing you can say in that moment, and to his small credit, he seemed to know it. I took no pleasure in the next part, or only the low, quiet kind you feel when a thing settles that has been owed for a very long time. I had no interest in watching Tristan Whitcomb beg, and he started to, and I stopped him. The way I had stopped him from calling the police, by raising one hand. "You don't need to do that," I told him. "Tristan, listen to me a second, because I'm only going to say it once, and not to humiliate you, though I understand if it lands that way." The room was silent. "You looked at me this morning, and you saw a man who could do nothing for you, and you decided that made it safe to treat me like garbage. That's the whole of what happened here. You didn't catch a thief. There was never a thief. You just found a person you were sure didn't matter, and you showed everyone exactly who you are when you think the person in front of you can't touch you." I nodded at the watch on the glass. That watch belonged to a man who fixed watches like the ones in your vault for 40 years. From a back room. For people who never learned his name. You just did to him, through me, the only thing the world ever did to him. So no, don't beg. Just stand there a minute and understand it. That's worth more than an apology. Then I turned to Cornelia, and I asked her to bring up the grand complication, and to write the sale herself. And I asked one more thing, and the one more thing is the part that matters. I asked that Iris Lund be the one to inspect and regulate the watch before it left the building, and that she be present while we did the paperwork, because I do not buy a watch like that without the person who actually understands it in the room. And there was exactly one of those at Sterling Vandermeer, and she was the one who had just been sent back to the bench. The rest of it took care of itself, the way it does once the truth is standing on the floor in a work jacket. The cameras, which Tristan had threatened me with, told the whole story in his place. They showed an old man who touched nothing, took nothing, and was followed and accused and made to empty his pockets on the strength of a coat. Sterling Vandermeer is a house that has survived 110 years on discretion and trust. And there is nothing a house like that fears more than a video of itself treating an innocent man like a criminal over the cut of his jacket. And Cornelia Vandermeer understood her exposure in about 4 seconds. Tristan Whitcomb did not finish the week. I did not ask for that. It was not mine to ask. It was simply the math of what he had done, and an owner who watched the tape did the math the way owners do. I am told he landed at a smaller house in a smaller city, and I hope he is kinder there, though I have stopped counting on that ending. Some men learn the lesson, and some only learn to be more careful about which strangers they decide are safe to be cruel to. And Daria Fenn. I told you I would come back to her. The customer who said you read about this and pointed the room at me. The slip of paper and the watch she had been working at the counter when I came in turned out to be a return. She had brought in a watch to sell back to the house, a Grail piece, the real version of which costs as much as a house. And while everyone was busy treating the old man in the work jacket like a criminal, the actual problem in the room was the counterfeit on Daria Fenn's wrist, which she was attempting to consign as genuine. I knew it was a fake from 10 feet away, because my father taught me to know, and I had almost said so an hour earlier and bitten it back. I did not have to say it in the end. Iris had already flagged it on intake. Her note was sitting in the back, ignored, because the floor had been too busy watching me. The one person they sent to the bench had been right about everything, twice, before lunch. Iris Lund did not stay a bench watchmaker much longer. And that is the part of this I am proudest of, more than the watch, more than Tristan. A collector at my level gives a great deal of restoration and service work to somebody, over the years. And I had been looking for a long time for the right pair of hands to give mine to, and I had just watched them defend a stranger for nothing. Iris does my work now, all of it, out of her own atelier, which she owns, with her name on the door, on the floor, in the front, where the customers come to her. The backroom geography that swallowed my father did not get to swallow her. I made sure of it, and I did not do it as charity, because she is the best in the city, and it would be a poor businessman who let the best in the city stay hidden in somebody else's back room to protect a manager's idea of who belongs where. There is a small brass plate on the door of her shop now, with her name on it, in the front, in the light. And the first time I saw it, I had to sit in the car a minute before I went in. A name on a door at the front of the house was the one thing the world never once gave my father. And there it was, given to the next one like him. That is as close to setting an old account right as I am ever likely to come. I bought the grand complication that afternoon. It is the watch my father revered above all others, the one he spoke about the way other men speak about a place they always meant to visit and never did. The one he held in his hands exactly once, to repair it for a man who owned it and could not have told you the time. I bought it for him. Cornelia wrote it up in the quiet of the private room, away from the floor, and when she slid the paper across for my signature, I thought about the cigar and the sandwich and the 2 hours alone with a movement that my father called the prize. And I signed my name slowly, the way you sign a thing you have been driving toward for 30 years without quite admitting it. It sits now in a case in my study, the most complicated, most beautiful object I will ever own. And next to it, on its own little stand, I keep a plain steel watch that does not run, that the finest watchmaker I ever knew bought himself the year I was born. I asked Iris, in the end, to open my father's watch. I had never let anyone. She did it with the care of a person handling something holy. And she did not make it run. because some things are not ours to start again. But she cleaned the dust of years out of it and closed it back up. And she told me the movement was beautiful, and that whoever had cared for it had loved it. And that is the only review my father ever got that I would have let stand. One last thing, and then I'll let you get back to your day. The next time you are somewhere fine, and you watch the floor decide that the person in the work jacket does not belong, go find the back room. Find the hands that actually make the beautiful thing possible. The repairman, the cook, the one who is never in the photograph, and learn their name and say it to them. Tell them the work is beautiful, too, while you are at it. It costs you nothing. And it is the thing they quietly gave up expecting to hear. And you may be the only person who ever says it out loud. They have been right about more than you know, usually twice, usually before lunch, and almost nobody has ever told them. My father fixed their watches for 40 years and was never once allowed to stand on the floor. I stood on it for him on a Tuesday in the spring, in a work jacket, and bought the watch he loved. And the only thing I regret is that he wasn't there to see his son refuse to use the loading dock door.